again, everyone. It's good to have you with us for this event.
Athletes, huddle up. It's time to begin. Get focused. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. Athletes, take your mark. Get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blue Robinson here. I want to thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Dang, we greatly appreciate you guys doing so. It helps get this podcast out a little bit further when you jump on and give us a review too. So if you're super bored in traffic and you have some hands-free stuff going on, give us a review, because we'd love to get this podcast out a little bit further to anyone who may be struggling with mental health issues, addiction, just overcoming adversity. Addict Athlete can be a resource for you guys to jump in and get to that starting line of life. As always, we want to maybe point you towards our website, Addict2Athlete.org. You'll find all of our backlog podcasts, information about recovery, tools and tips, and Christmas season, holiday season coming up. We have a team store. What better way to show you your loved ones how much you care about them by jumping in and giving them an Addict to Athlete official running jersey. So jump on Addict2Athlete.org for more information about all of what we do here on the team. Athletes, I am so excited to talk to our guest today. I've heard a lot about her from one of our other athletes. You guys probably know Cowbell Rob out there doing some cool stuff. But he's been telling me a little bit about today's guest and about some of the things that she's done and overcome and just kind of the person she is. And when I jumped on some of her social media, I really did feel like her story is going to resonate with you guys, the listeners out there. And I want to welcome Arwn Decker into the podcast studio today. Even though we're doing this virtually, you've done this before, I can tell, because you got crystal clear audio out there. So that's a benefit too. Arwn, welcome to the Addict to Athlete podcast. Would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about you, and we'll jump into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Blue, for having me. It's my pleasure. Gosh, tell me a little bit about yourself. It's a pretty big, all-encompassing, but I guess as it relates to...
It's a good starting line, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have been a lifelong athlete. So athletics have spanned the entire length of my life, starting from about age 6. So competitive swimmers where I started, and I'd say I kind of finished off my school career as a Division I athlete playing volleyball at the University of Washington, and then a lot of athletics in between. For a school voted most athletic. So that gives you just a pretty big swath. I love sports, and I love how sports play into all areas of life and really help. But I graduated college with a zoology degree. I was getting married right at that time, found myself divorced at 24, and fired from my dream job, which was working at a wildlife rehabilitation center and actually helping to release animals back out into the wild after having, any sort of number of things that they encounter in daily life. So my life kind of came imploding at about 24. And at that point, I had to get what everybody called a real job. And that's because I couldn't pay the bills.
Yeah, the big girl job.
Yeah,
yep.
I couldn't pay the bills working and running a wildlife rehabilitation center. So I actually went on a single job interview. And that was with somebody that my girlfriend just happened to meet in a coffee shop, and he was starting a new financial planning firm. And that interview was more than 23 years ago. And I took that one job, and eventually that guy became my business mentor, partner, eventually my husband. And now we've been married for 19 years and we have 3 boys. So
zoology and financial planning. Like, what the heck? Who'd have guessed?
Yeah, exactly. Right? And so, my husband and I sold our financial planning firm in June of last year. And so now I get to do what I'm really, truly passionate about, which is train financial advisors on how to best and properly market to women, because that's what we did very successfully as a company. And I get to be an endurance athlete now. So I get to the time to be able to do it. And that's where I met Cowbell Rob doing 29:029.
That is awesome. Yeah, I don't think you can get any further away from a degree than what you did. So that's kind of cool though. But you know what? It's your niche. And I think that's flipping rad. But the coolest part about what I've heard come from you is kind of that leadership, even as being a woman kind of in a male-dominated sport, male-dominated career. I think sometimes we forget, and ladies out there, I need you to really pay attention to what Arwen's going to be talking about today, because you guys are stronger than you think you are. And us guys, we have to be, I guess, in a mindset too, that we want everyone to get to that top of that mountain. And I think some of the stuff you say just resonates because it's so genuine and real. And, I loved the one that I first saw, and it was one that my wife Marissa sent over to me. And she's like, just listen to this. And it was the little clip you made about how you stopped drinking more so just to see if you could do it and see what would happen. And the benefits kind of rain down on you on some unexpected heartbeats, I think. Like, tell me a little bit about like, why stop? I mean, because like you said, you probably didn't have the full-fledged blown out addiction where you were just constantly 24/7, but you felt like maybe this is keeping me back from
Right.
something. You didn't even probably know what that
Right.
was, but I love the way that you termed that. I just want to see if I could do it, but you notice the benefits of it. And does that make sense? Like, a lot of folks don't realize that if you just halt for a second, something might happen. Tell us a little bit about
it
that.
was December of 21, and my husband actually had literally that weekend hit his 1 year of sobriety. And so it was kind of like, there was in this background, it's like, okay, he had chosen to give that up, didn't feel it was serving him well. I had background history. I grew up in a family. My dad was an alcoholic, closet alcoholic. And it was my stepdad, but my parents had been married since I was 2. My mom hid it so well that I didn't know he was an alcoholic until my first year in college. And that's when I stumbled upon an AA pamphlet in her purse. And I was like, what the heck is this? And then everything came into focus very clearly, that all of the things that I'd been told was he was tired, or, all of these excuses that had been given. It was that he was a closet alcoholic. He used to just sit and drink fifths of vodka. And so now it became a lot more apparent. But unfortunately, by that point, both my sister and I had become very skilled at the art of enabling. And so we also both married alcoholics. And so understanding that component, after my husband had given up alcohol because he didn't feel it was serving him well, I was like, well, maybe I should give this a try. And in that same weekend, I signed up for my very first endurance race, which was 29:29. So hiking the height of Mount Everest in less than 36 hours, vertical gain only. And I was like, I know that alcohol is not good for you to perform optimally. So how about I just give it up while I'm training for this endurance race? And that was my initial thought. And about 4 months in, I was like, I am never going back, because I finally recognized for the first time, it was the longest period of my life, before the time I ever drank, that I'd ever taken off from having alcohol as what I would say a little bit of a crutch in my life. Being very introverted, it was the great thing. It was the great, friend to go with to a party, because there was no other way I could get over the feeling of anxiety that I had being in those social situations and things of that nature. But certainly no one ever sat me down and said, hey, Arwen, you have an issue with alcohol. But I privately knew it had a hold on me. And so getting to that point 4 months in, that's when it was like I started looking back to the length of my life, and so many of the times in which I would have those feelings of self-deprecation in the morning, because I told myself I wasn't going to drink the night before. And even if I just had one glass of wine, I would wake up at 2 a.m. I wouldn't feel my best. Then I would wake up at my normal time at 6 or whatever, need to go for my workout. And the first thought I would have is, why did I drink the night before? I told myself I wasn't going to do it. And that's when it was like I started to get this clarity as to how alcohol did have a hold on me, even though it wasn't this outwardly facing. There was very much an inward battle that I was privately facing. And when I finally removed that out, I couldn't believe how my life changed. I saw what was happening for my husband, But for me personally, I couldn't believe it. And that's really what began that journey that has been now almost 2 years come end of November.
That is absolutely awesome. And the cool part about that, listeners, is what she just like eloquently described was our erase and replace philosophy. And I'm a firm believer, Arwen, that if you're going to erase something in your life, you have to replace it with something of greater value. And so some people will say, you know what, I don't really believe that I can find a better escapism or replacement as, you know, whatever drug of choice,
Sure.
alcohol, say. And it's funny because what I've noticed is there's patterns in what people use. And I've been doing, mental health counseling and addiction therapies for, a little over 20 years now. And I've noticed there's patterns to this. I've noticed that people that smoke marijuana, use the THC, or they're drinking, it's a depressant. And so they start like self-medicating depression. But what you started doing with running and working out and doing those things were replacing those same endorphins. And so you were then conquering your depression and maybe anxiety, whatever, by utilizing your legs, your motivation, your endurance training, and it literally replaced the need for it. And so you felt it at the same time. I think that's the coolest thing, and people don't realize that it movement equals healing. And simply by you just taking that challenge, look at what awareness you started to have, and just the reality of this. Because I look at it like, you have the depression, the alcohol, but then the running, and then the mountain climbing, and all this stuff, and you're like, stepping out of that world of anonymity and silence and hiding into a public eye. And you call yourself an introvert. I'm like, I've seen a lot of your social media. I can't even imagine like, you being an introvert secretly, but that's what it does too, right? It suppresses that person that we could be. And so if you would have kept it, we wouldn't, look at all the people you wouldn't have met. Look at all the experiences you would never have had, all the hearts you wouldn't touch. You have to stop now and look back and be like, wow, I'm so much happier now. And the influence that you have is great.
So much.
Do you sometimes witness the majesty of what all that is?
Yeah. And also you start to realize truly who you are. And that's been one of the most incredible components for me, because I thought I had pretty solid self-awareness. But when I removed alcohol out of my life, I fully embraced what I was willing to do as a human being, what things felt like I wanted to draw into them, or I was willing to overcome the, just the butterflies to go and do it, whether that be going to an event and having to interact with people. Or I also started to realize there are things I will no longer do, because the only reason I was willing to do it and could get myself through it was by having a glass of wine in my hand. And it's like, no, I'm just not doing that anymore. Yeah. Nobody's telling me I have to. So I'm not going to, because that is not truly who I am. And I can recognize, and I know that there are so many people out there in that same position. I can look at photographs. Like one just came up on our Alexa this morning. And I can absolutely remember the drinking component of that night. It was an argument. My husband and I were having an argument and it wasn't going well. And then finally it was kind of like, well, let's just go both have a drink. And I just remember how sad that when I look at that photo, there's a time stamp on there that's related to alcohol. And I realized that there are so many memories that I can see in my life that are like, wow, that was a really great day. And then I think, was that a really great day because there was alcohol involved? Or would I have truly had that great of a day without it? Was that really who I am? And so now I'm looking at these moments in my life. I've done now 4 endurance races since that time in November. And I'm thinking about now having had 4 of those experiences, but then also I've volunteered on the mountain too. And I always choose the overnight. So staying up from, 11 p.m. until 6 a.m, working with the people who are really struggling. And I'm like, I've never felt more alive, and alcohol has nothing to do with it. It's not this, I pulled this all-nighter in college and, we were drinking all night. It's like, I pulled an all-nighter as a 48-year-old woman, and I've never felt more alive in my life. And yet I'm not hungover in the morning. I know everything that happened. I know it's because I wanted to be there. I know the interactions were true, and the way I was, meeting people where they were and their struggle was real. And it wasn't fabricated because this little attractively packaged poison in my glass that just absolutely smells like crap now. That's just so funny. It wasn't there. It wasn't a part of it. And that awareness is it's so vibrant and so colorful, and it's not muted. And that's one of the things I could have never imagined until being in the position that I'm in now.
Yeah. So I don't know why this subject keeps coming up, but on the last 3 or 4 podcasts I've done, this topic keeps coming up. So I'm curious, like, the ethos out there must need people to be hearing this, but I love that what you said, those little timestamps that we have, and how you can remember those things. And I always talk about this with my athletes who feel that way, like either they get too far ahead by future tripping, or they get their heads too stuck far back in the past and they forget where they are right now. And I talk about this all the time. It's called the theory of the gap, right? Like, here's all of us like running or marching or walking to the horizon, and there's always a horizon, and you want to get there. I remember doing the Pony Express 50-mile ultra marathon, and it's flat as a pancake out there, and you can literally see forever. And I'm like, we have to get to that horizon. And once you get to the horizon, the crappy thing is it moves. So what do you think you get there? The horizon's a whole nother far sea away, right? But you can always stop and turn around and see how far you've come. And I think there's magic in that. You being able to see that picture, but have it be a milestone from way back instead of like where you're going. And I think that we're always kind of in the middle. And so that's kind of a cool thing, And I love the fact that these analogies that you do, specifically on the mountain, they really do resonate with that, because it's a hard climb.
Yeah. And
but the view is worth it. And you can see,
right. And especially as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to sobriety, because, when I was early on in it, some friends of ours who were both sober by that point, she was just always talking about no future tripping, no looking, like, am I going to be not drinking a year from now, kind of thing. And this was actually before I embarked on it, but it was just conversations that she and I were having, and she was applying it to a lot of just life in general. And the truth is that there's kind of two sides to it. And this is what I've determined in hiking 29029, and this constant, going up this mountain and this struggle. And it takes, 30, 32, 34 hours to do that, of constant hiking. And you're like, I have so far to go. And then it's like what you said, how we do it on the mountain is, that's when you stop, when you need to rest, you stop and you take in the view in quotes. Because when you turn around, you see not only how far you've gone, but you also take in the beauty of where you are. And so much of what I've learned in these last 2 years is to truly be present where my feet are planted. Because if you're searching for that big thing, whatever that big goal is, I mean, we all have them. It could be buying a home. It could be getting married. It could be landing that new job. It could be losing 50 pounds. It could be, just put whatever it is in there. There's something that we're attaining, but the truth of the matter is, the attainment of the goal is such a small part of the entire journey. And if you spend your time constantly future tripping about the future, you are going to miss the present moment. And there's so much joy and life and experience that comes within that present moment. And so it is so vital to stay present where your feet are planted and enjoy the moment and not think about tomorrow. But on the flip side, when it comes to not drinking tomorrow or today, I guess, that's when future tripping, in my opinion, needs to occur. You need to play it forward. You need to go, how am I going to feel tomorrow morning if I do, like I had posted about my son's wedding. And, that's a big concern that a lot of people have when they stop drinking. It's like, well, what do I do when I go to a wedding? It's like, okay, well, first you need to know what you're walking into. I mean, 90% of the people at my son's wedding were drinking. I was the only person in one of the rooms when there was a 21-year-old and a 70-year-old, and they were doing tequila shots. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I feel a little awkward. Yeah. I liked myself a little tequila. And so it was like kind of that feeling. But then all I had to do is, after that initial quick moment of like, I'm the odd man out, go, yeah, but tomorrow morning when I get up, I am going to feel so awesome, and I will not for a second regret I did not drink today. And so that future tripping comes into play when we have to think about, what am I going to feel like tomorrow? Am I going to self-deprecate at 6 a.m? Is going to be the first thought I have when I wake up, and tell myself, God, why did I drink yesterday when I said I wasn't going to? And so just play that. And then it's like, you know what? The next morning, tell you what, when I went on my nice hike, I was not at all concerned. I didn't drink the night before, didn't affect my relationships with anybody. I did finally get to my point where I was like, I'm kind of done. It's been a long day. And I kind of started retreating from, the people and the party and all that kind of stuff, because it needed to wind down. But that's okay. Before, I would have felt obligated to stick around and stay. And I was like, I don't have to. I'm a full grown adult woman. I can make my own freaking choices. I don't need to stay at a party and hang out and talk to people when all they are is annoying at this point anyway. And they're not going to remember what conversation was we were having anyway.
Precisely. I love that, because you are putting the choice factor right there at the front and center. And I find this a lot. There are people who say, well, you know what? I'm doing this now. I'm making these life changes because I can't drink anymore. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can. And they look at me like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you still have a mouth. You still have the esophagus. You have everything you need to drink.
Yep.
But do you want to? Yeah. Do you want to? And I think people, they forget about that. Like there's power in saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this, versus, I can't, if one drink leads to another. But it's like, those are excuses. And I love the fact that you looked at that situation. You're like, I don't want this. You could have.
Just because I can doesn't mean I ought to.
Yeah. You think there's power in that?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times have you said that? I can't climb this mountain. Yes, you can.
Right.
Like, the people forget how powerful words are, and even something as subtle as "I can't" can totally screw up the whole functionality, the whole day.
Yeah. 100%. And it is about just taking one more step. I mean, that's one of the analogies too in the mountain. Is it's not so deeply difficult to take one more step up that incline. It's not. Nobody's asking something so great and grandiose of you. Most moments in life, as it relates to our sobriety, are not a wedding where there's, 50, 60 people and free drinks and everything's flowing like water. Most of our moments aren't like that. Our moments are, I'm feeling at the end of a hard work day, I'm a little bit exhausted. I'm a little bit anxious. My kids are bothering and irritating me. So what am I going to do? Am I going to do the easy part and just grab a glass of wine and use an external source that is going to temporarily make me feel better, but it's just going to compound the issue? Or am I going to find something healthy? Like, right now I need to go and just do 30 minutes of meditation before I'm going to absolutely lose my mind. And I don't want to do that on you wonderful people that I love. So I need right now 25 minutes to go in and meditate, or to go spend some time in prayer, or to go just do a walk, or to, check off the myriad of healthy opportunities that we have, but also recognizing full well that the nature of alcohol, that 24-hour reset of it, you starting to go through that boy, I'm totally missing the word, where your withdrawal, where your body's going, okay, I'd like another glass of wine to get me back. And then it just perpetuates, instead of going, wait a second, alcohol is not serving me physically. Why would I choose something if there's something healthier I can choose that is going to make me in the end feel better? And I'm going to have to learn the skills to manage these feelings that I have, instead of having something that gives me this false sense that I have managed it and I haven't done anything. I'm just perpetuating it.
Yeah, spot on. So you bring up something interesting that I want to get your input on. And, I've noticed this, since the pandemic, and during the pandemic, I think it was at its peak and pretty rough. And that was the wine culture started to really kind of infiltrate like the mom. Right. Yeah. And I started seeing, I would buy stuff like, I remember I bought some running shoes online, and when I opened them up, there was a mommy wine club like card in there. It's like, here you go. I'm like, dude, these are men's shoes. Like, what? But it was kind of a crazy thing. And I started realizing how catered like that aspect of you having a bad day as a mom. You know what? Is it an uphill battle with the kids? Do you feel like you're ever going to reach the top of that mountain? Have some wine. And I got thinking, that is crazy that culture got so pushed on the moms and the women that I'm seeing the residual effects of that. There's got to be a huge contrast from, again, being on top of that mountain that you yourself climbed versus that perceived mountain of a challenge, and to wash it away with wine. What do you think of that? It's a hell of a marketing campaign, and it did pretty well for a while because I saw a lot of it. But now I'm seeing the residual effects of it. Don't you think that's kind of a crappy way to celebrate motherhood?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's terrible because all it is perpetuating the issues that we already are facing. Being a parent is hard enough, and yet watching our teenage sons experience both sides of their mom and dad, because our youngest is 16. And so when my husband started to embark on this journey for himself, he was 12 at the time. And so he was old enough to know how alcohol had affected our family prior to that. And then now being in the very formidable years for him as to what do I do as it relates to alcohol in my own life, he has a vastly different side of its effects. He has seen the negative side, and he's seen how dramatically transformed his parents' lives have become in the last 2.5, 3 years. And so it's not only the disservice for the mom, but alcohol, of course, has this ricochet effect in the children and what habits they are seeing and what seems normal and okay and acceptable. And they can't filter through that if they've only seen one view, the negative view, which again, this is what our two younger sons have seen. They've seen both sides of it. So at least they have now this comparison where they can go, okay, this is, I see what's projected out online and all that kind of stuff. But my parents have also talked to me about all the other crap that comes along with it, and recognizing behavioral changes and recognizing the difference in how we handle things and how much of the difficulty is spoken through, and people say sorry a lot more quickly because we recognize our behavior wasn't appropriate in that situation, and just being much more humble to have those conversations with our kids. And so it's extraordinarily detrimental, not only to the individual who's drinking it, but the children that are watching and learning a behavior and play that one forward. Is that going to be a beneficial behavior? Do you want them to do that? Because now I have, of course, a very different view on alcohol. And so I see it differently as it plays out in other people's lives. And you can start to go, gosh, this is a start to a really bad future. At this rate that they're drinking in their life, that it's become that much ingrained at that age, it's not going to end well. But more of it is the sadness that you're like, gosh, you don't recognize how much of your own life you are robbing yourself and your potential and your future and your productivity and your abilities, because they are deadened, or they're lessened because of alcohol, because of a substance that does not, name the substance, make you a better human being that performs better, period.
Yeah.
But you often don't realize it until you have gotten to the 100%. Other side of it. And that's the hard part.
Yeah. But I love that too. And listeners, I hope you took heed to that, because there's some deep principle in there. And I think these are awesome experiences when you can, again, stop to take in that view, right? Because there's no way that your son couldn't come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I'm up against this heavy challenge. And you know how to take on challenge, right? Through sobriety, through ultra running, through endurance sports. Like, they know that you are a person that has done really hard things, And so I love that mindset, because so many times we get parents that just, placate to the substance or what have you. and they miss out on so many opportunities. And when that time comes, when they need to kind of be that parent or that advice giver, it's like, yeah, but I can't ask you. You can't even, stop drinking, or you can't, stop, using.
Right.
I love that fact because they know that mom and dad can do really, really hard things. It's got to put you in a different mindset and perspective at that point, does it not?
Oh, 100%. And just knowing that at any time they come to us, we are going to be 100% present, because there are times in history that I can just think about those moments where I'm just like, I'm so glad something major didn't happen at that moment, because myself or my husband would not have been a fully present parent or spouse to be able to handle some sort of emergency. And it doesn't always have to be emergency related, but it also, just as a mother, it opened so much more honesty and dialogue with my kids in a time period of their lives where they need to know I'm willing to just go, yeah, it's just, I screwed up, or I'm not good at that, or this is something I've struggled with, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I don't carry the weight of that. And a lot of that is my faith. I mean, I know that Christ has taken all of my sins, past, future, and present. But my faith is also just knowing I don't have to bear the weight of mistakes that I have made, but I also do bear the responsibility of doing what I can to become a little bit better tomorrow than I am today. And if I know something, like, it's kind of like if you were stealing your whole life to get by, and then you finally were confronted and told stealing is against the law. It is illegal. You are not to be doing that. It's not okay. Just because you did it for a really long period of time doesn't make it okay for the future. You now have a realization, this is no longer healthy. This is no longer right. And I need to do whatever I can to overcome that. And, truthfully, the best book for me that I read was Craig Beck's Alcohol Lied to Me. And that really was the first time for both Randy and I, my husband and I, is that it was like, I'd never really looked at alcohol from a different perspective, and what it was taking from me, and the marketing side of it, and how it was like this, mommy time, and, after school, a mommy, whatever they call us the drinks, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Everything is, very, very attractively packaged. It's still poison. Your body is not happy. There is a reason why a brand fresh new 12-year-old goes to smell his dad's beer, and it's like, that is the most disgusting smell I've ever smelled in my entire life. And they don't wake up going, 100%. This is awesome and amazing and tasty. And yet we train ourselves to believe. And a lot of that is the marketing of it too. And so it's just, it's like this awareness, but the awareness only comes from research, like listening to your podcast, to listening to, I follow many accounts on my Instagram, because I'm very protective over what comes in my feed, but I have many sobriety accounts, because it was like, there are other people who realize this same thing. It's like, I'm not fooled anymore like I was. And so being reminded of that, and then reading books. I mean, we consumed book after book after book about alcohol, or people who just had, like the craziest stories with alcohol and drugs. And you're like, man, my story may not have been that to that degree, but make no mistake, if you come to a night pretty consistently and you end up having that glass of wine that you told yourself you weren't going to have when you woke up in the morning, there is something you need to look deeper at.
There you go.
Because it may not be this full blown, it's destroying your life, but it is eroding your potential. Period. Full stop.
Oh, 100%.
It's eroding your potential.
I love it. You are absolutely spot on. But here's the deal with that potential, right? To reach that telos, the ultimate potential, you turned a whole leaf. I am so curious though, what in the world possessed you to be like, endurance running, endurance sports, let's go. Like, that probably wasn't, I mean, you are a natural athlete by just who you are, like know, but like, what got you to flip the script to even say, I'm going to turn this one off for a minute to try this? Because I have to convince people, like, hey, at first you're going to think running is for criminals and it's going to suck, but when you're done, you're going to feel great. And just the mechanism, the mechanics of running, what I've noticed as a therapist is that it mimics EMDR therapy, and that's how we process trauma. And it's one of the coolest things when people start running. They're like, dude, again, the endorphins, the dopamine, everything starts pumping again. They start waking up. But I'm curious, what started that? What started your second wind, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question, because endurance sports have never been my thing. I mean, even anything that would be considered distance. I was a sprinter in swimming, 50, hundreds, and that was about it. And then, playing basketball, of course, that's a lot of sprinting and things of that nature. But then softball is very much start and stop. And then track was 100, 200 hurdles, long jump, nothing more than that. And then volleyball is a start, stop kind of thing. And so the only thing that would fall into any sort of distance is I ran a half marathon in 2011. That was the extent of it. So when I was sitting in that room in December, it was actually a big group of leaders, financial advisors and leaders and things like that. One of them was up on stage, and I had heard about 29 on 29 through Jesse Itzler. And he had spoken about a couple of years before, as he had launched that company as one of the three founders. And so I had heard a little bit about it. But so this guy got up on stage and said, we secured up 10 spots. We still had to pay for them. But he's like, we secured up 10 spots. So the first 10 people who run up here and secure up those spots, you'll get the ticket in the spot for 29/029 next year. And then he said the date, and the date was my 47th birthday. And it was like just everything inside of me said, I have to be there. I have to be there. And my husband saw this look on my face. He goes, "You're not doing this, are you?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I am." It was like, we're not talking about this. It was like pretty expensive.
You get in position to start running
yes,
up there.
Totally,
I can totally see it. I can totally see you like getting down.
Totally. I'm like on the edge of my stage.
What are you doing?
Waiting for him. So he gets off stage. I'm literally the first one to him. So I secure up the spot. And then, bless his heart, he sends the...
Let me ask you this question real quick.
Sure.
Let me ask you this question real quick. Did 10 people absolutely rush up there, or was it a slow trickle? Because if you were
10,
first,
10
I'm curious
rushed.
who was behind you.
10,
did everyone leap up?
Yeah, well, there were probably 100 people in the room. So yeah, they got secured up very, very quickly. But I got the congratulatory.
So there was at least 10 crazy people in that group.
Yeah, there were. Actually, I think for that one specifically, though, this tells you a little bit. I think the 10 original spots went through 47 people to finally actually get it, because the amount of people who signed up and then quit. Once they actually were facing the reality of it, a lot of people dropped out, and then new people would get in. So yeah, I guess there were a lot of people who really thought it would be a great idea, but didn't actually follow through. So I get the congratulatory email that night, and it said in the kind of in the middle of it, I was going to grow as a man, and it ended, "Congratulations, brother." And I was like, "Hey, just wondering, did you not expect a woman to sign up for this one?" So I ended up
copy and paste.
Yeah. So I ended up being the only woman who signed up of that group of 10. But that was, I wanted to remind myself, or prove to myself that I still had more within me, but I also was at a place in my life where I had stopped apologizing for being a strong woman that could still be feminine. Because I'm in a financial industry. I mean, it's 80% men. Yeah. So to succeed in that industry, you often have to be this assertive, direct, competitive, that whole thing, which I have that. It's very much a part of my DNA and how I've grown up as a kid. But I finally was embracing the fact that I'm okay to be a soft, vulnerable woman that can also be strong, and to remind myself and other women, it's okay to be you, to cry in a meeting, to be that soft, vulnerable side, but also say, I am an effing badass, and I will take anything to task because I know that I can, but I do not have to do it in your way. I don't have to be that kind of woman anymore to just fit into somebody's mold. And so that was really like what was welling up inside of me. It's like, I want to be able to show that to my community and the women around me that it's okay to bawl your eyes out when you cross over the finish line and you still did it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, it can look different.
Oh,
I
yeah.
could put on a light up tutu in the middle of the night and be perfectly fine with myself. Right. And so that was really what it brought me into that. And just like anybody else who experiences a huge overcoming moment that you choose to be in, not crisis, but you choose to be in, like an endurance race, you get to the end of it. And in a couple of days, you're like, oh, I want that feeling again. I want to experience that I can do something way harder than I ever expected to be able to do. And the funny thing is, I'll kind of just top it off with this one, is when I did my second 29-0-29. So I did my first one, Snow Basin, Utah. That's when I met Cowbell Rob. And that was my 47th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which was a brand new mountain the following year. That was this year in July. And I had told myself privately, I want to suffer more than I did the first time. First time, I know that I accomplished it. I didn't get sick. It was it ran, I'd say, according to my plan. And yet I wanted to believe that there was more inside of me. And so I had said that a couple of times to myself, and I'm just like, oh no, why am I saying that to myself? And, but then there was also one other thing that I was asking of myself on that mountain that day or that weekend, is that I didn't want to make it about myself anymore. The first one was very much about me. What can I do? How can I accomplish this? And very introverted and into myself. Whereas this one, I wanted to meet 50 people on that mountain, which was a big ask from an introvert. Big ask, because that was diverting energy to interact with people in a way that makes me uncomfortable. And I got 37.
Exactly.
I got pretty close. But I suffered on that mountain. I got really sick. I couldn't keep food down. I was throwing up in a tutu 1 a.m. in the morning on the side of the mountain. It was hilarious because,
and you were sober.
And I was sober. Exactly. That's exactly what I said. I'm like, and I'm not in college, I'm not throwing up because I drank too much. And so it was like, puke and rally. That's exactly what happened by choice. Right. And the funniest thing is it was so dark and the pathway was only one person wide and it was so steep. It was about where I was about 35% grade, really steep. So people were coming up slow. And so here I am throwing up in a light up tutu on the side of the mountain. And I can see the headlamps slowly getting closer to me. And I'm going, this is going to be great. And the first two guys that pass by me, they don't say, hey, are you okay? Is there anything going on? I just loved it. They go, man, this is rock and roll. Because here we were all in this moment.
Like, that's an experience.
Yeah, exactly. And then my kid calls me literally 1 minute later after I'm cleaning myself up. And he's like, hey, Mom, just checking in on you. How you're doing? And I'm like, well, just to let you know, I was just throwing up on the side of the mountain. It's pretty awesome. But so I did, I got really sick. I couldn't keep food down. The hours were passing and it was just, I was suffering. And yet I had to laugh as I was also recording this on the gondola ride down. Cause I'm like, I had asked for this because I wanted again to believe I was capable of more and that I could continue taking one more step, even though I felt sick. It was 3 a.m. I was totally alone. It was cold on a mountain. I was having to constantly, just struggle to get up this incline. And yet there's such power when you choose to not quit. Because I always say, it is okay to want to quit. It is okay to want to quit. Just don't. And a lot of people confuse the fact that because I feel like I want to quit, there's something wrong with me. It's not. There is nothing wrong with you if you want to quit. But it's coming up to that moment and believing you have the capability to just take another step. And if we just can do that, eventually, whatever this feeling is that we have will subside. The suffering will not last forever. It will subside. The sun will come up. We will feel better. And then we will be amazed at what we're capable of. But so many people get to that point where they want to quit and they confuse it, and they do. And that's what I learned that time on that mountain.
Yeah. You're absolutely right on so many different ways. Like, for those that don't know what the 29-0-29 is, explain that to them. Like, because to me, I'm thinking that's freaking nuts. Like, running downhill's the reason you go uphill. And so, like, you'd have to really do some convincing for me, like I could say, oh, it's a very expensive race and all that, but like the torture you put yourself through, I'm like, why?
Right.
Like, there's something out there.
Right.
Like, because before I even got on the call with you, and I've talked to Rob about this, I'm like, there's no way I would want to do this race. But just listening to you on that little moment, for some reason, something sparked back there in the back of my head. I'm like, shut up. Don't run up to her with a desire like that first 10 people, right?
Yeah.
What is it? Because the way you described that, like, we were all there with you. So what is it? And describe it, and why the pull to it?
Well, for me, hiking, I love to hike. So I mean, not everybody finds the draw of hiking, but a lot of the people I meet on the mountain start that way. They're like, I just thought this would be, my friends were doing it, and so I'll check it off my list. I hate hiking. I find it totally boring, or blah, 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 whatever. Or worse yet, you have to train for it on flat landscape. You live somewhere where there's no mountains, and so you're doing it on a treadmill and a Stairmaster.
You Florida people are in trouble.
Right? Horrible.
Yep.
But everybody that I've spoken with, that I have met through either volunteering on those mountains or being on the mountain with them, the realization is the same. It's about community. And I know that's what you guys are building with Addicts to Athletes too. And it's the feeling of not
100%.
being alone, the feeling that there is collective suffering. There is a collective feeling of overcoming. There is a recognition that I know what you're going through. I have been there, or maybe I'm currently there, or maybe I was just there an hour ago, right? And I'm going to walk this with you. And that's why I love it. I know it's the same reason why Rob loves volunteering on the mountain too, because being able to be on the mountain at 2 a.m. with people who are battling between, do I go in and try and get 2 hours of sleep? I've been throwing up. I feel like crap. I'm exhausted. Of course you're tired. You've been hiking and you've been up for, 18, 19, 20 hours, right? Of course you're tired. And I mean, what else would you expect, right? And so to be in that space with people, there's magic that happens when you can enter into somebody else's suffering and relate to it and say, I have been there. That's the whole reason why a sponsor helps people in recovery, because there's like, I know what it's like. I've been there. Call me. I'll be the person at 2 a.m. that is going to talk you off the ledge and go, nah, I think you actually have more in you than you believe. Why don't you get yourself a little bit of a snack? Maybe have yourself a Pepsi, get yourself some caffeine, and let's just go for one more ascent. And so to clarify for your audience how 29-0-29 works, very simply stated, it's on multiple mountains around the country and now a couple in Canada, is you hike up a certain amount of vertical gain and then you ride the gondola down. It's always on ski resorts in, summertime. So you ride the gondola down. So it could be like the 2 mountains I did this year. I did Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which took us 19 ascents. It's the most ascents of any mountain that they have. And you got 1,571 vertical feet per ascent. And then you took this little teeny 6-minute gondola ride down, which was so deeply not satisfying. And so it was really, really, really steep.
6 minutes.
Yeah, 6 minutes was not very long to rest your legs. So you did 29,029 vertical feet, which is the height of Mount Everest. You did that in about 20 miles. Okay. So that's one gauge. Then I just, 3 weekends ago, completed Whistler with my 18-year-old son. He was the youngest person on the mountain. He broke his leg July 2nd. So he had 5.5 weeks to complete a 20-week training. Remarkable. And I walked every step of that journey with him. It took us, we had 45 minutes to spare by the time we actually crossed over the threshold. So for Whistler, we only had to do 8 ascents, but each of those ascents was 3,900 vertical feet. So it was very, very, very long. and you hit about 30 miles. So Jackson Hole, you hit the 29,000 in 20 miles, whereas Whistler, you did it in 30 miles. So much longer, not as steep, but a lot more time on your feet and a lot more mileage that you have to put under. So that's kind of, and then all the other mountains are somewhere a blend of in between. But, there's all sorts of factors, and this is just true about life. Weather. On Whistler, we had a beautiful day the first day, fantastic hiking weather. Second day, pouring down rain, wind when you would get in the open areas in the mountain, and then it's snowing at the top. Okay. So then you're having to figure out, how do I figure out my gear for 4 miles?
All four
yeah,
seasons.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas Jackson Hole was hot. 8 a.m. in the morning, you feel like it's 80 degrees and there's no shade and it's just relentless heat and vertical gain, and you're just exhausted and you have altitude. And so there's just a lot of factors. But after I completed my first one, I'm like, I'm in this community for life, because it wasn't just people doing, endurance athletes going and doing another cool endurance race. A lot of those people have never even done a 5K. And when you stand at the last 2 hours and you watch the people who are completing this, who have never left the mountain, they've been out there for 35 hours, and they're just continuing to take one more step. And you see very normal looking, non-endurance athlete people who have the grit and determination to not quit. That's when you go, this is different. This is different, because I get the opportunity to walk with that person a little bit, because, I pass them along the way. Whereas I get passed by the really, really fit people along the way, and I get to hear their stories. So you actually get to interact with all different types of people and learn their stories of why they're there. Why would somebody choose to do this? And most people have a very powerful why. And learning about them and having moments where you're not running past them, you actually get to talk to them a little bit and meet people. And that's what makes this community really unique, because it's not just one long course. It's this course that you're like, hey, I've seen you. How are you doing? It's like, we're kind of on the same cadence or whatever. Or, you just meet people. Like one guy we rode the gondola down with him and he got stung by bees. He's like, what the heck? We're just talking about it on the way down and stuff. And you're like, why are you here? And where'd you come from? And yeah, it's a really cool community. And I love it.
It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling to wrap my head around. And I will be very blunt with you, and I'll tell you this. On Addict to Athlete, we shy away from for-profit events and things, because we don't have a very large budget when it comes to this kind of stuff. When Rob was telling me how much this thing cost, I'm like, you're out of your freaking mind, Rob. Right. I'm like, for $5,000, we can pay for 50 athletes to do 20 marathons. Sure. But listening to you, I'm starting to understand a little bit more about it. It's not just about the money. There's an investment there, and there's something bigger out there. And like you said, out of those 10 people that ran up there, not all of them made it to the top, because 29 requires some training. I mean, you can't just show up day one and be like, let's go. And I remember Rob telling me that there's also like training programs, and it's like, you have to prepare for this. And he showed me the app on the phone, and I'm like, now I'm starting to understand where the money goes. I mean, does that make sense? It's like, there's a lot going on, because they want to get you to the top. And if you invest that kind of money, chances are you're going to invest that kind of time, which is more valuable than anything. And I can picture you and your son. You're going to make me emotional now. There's not a lot of times when moms get to spend 30 plus hours with their son.
No way.
Unadulterated time, just you two. Like that's something that when that Alexa picture pops up, when we got gray hair and we're 90 years old and you've got grandkids running all over, that you'd be like, that was a day.
That's right.
Does that make sense? Like, that's what it's really for. And so I'm with you on that. Don't tell Rob, but I would actually consider maybe doing this one time, because I'm feeling what you're saying. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to, because I'm like, I don't get it. It seems miserable. It seems expensive. Yeah. But just the way you're describing, I'm like, that's the ticket. That's what it's about.
It's a community. It's
not giving up when things get hard. It's about community.
Yeah, it is.
I'm amazed by it.
And you're totally right. I just want to put an end cap on this. Well, as it relates to my son,
Please,
as it
ahead.
relates to my son, I recorded a reel on the mountain. It's on my Instagram, Arwen Decker. And it was literally this. I mean, it was the gorgeous day. The sun was setting. We were halfway up the mountain in Whistler, and just that beautiful hue of a sunset. And I said, the sun is setting on today, and I hope what you exchanged in your life for was worth it. And, and then I just talked about this moment in time. And, my son was in the background. You could see that just the look of just pride on his face. This moment is something that when he's 80 and I'm gone, he will never forget. He will never forget it. And for us to have shared that with him being an 18-year-old, he was my hiking buddy. So it's not like my other two kids would have ever considered doing this. He was my hiking buddy. He loves to hike. That's his thing. So when he asked for that for his 18th birthday, I was like, that's an expensive ask. And you better be committed to finishing this. Otherwise, there's no way. There's absolutely no way I'm going to pay for that ticket, even for your 18th birthday, and not have you be committed to it. So when he broke his leg on July 2nd, he happened to be on the first of 2 days into a 28-day. It was his graduation gift. He was in Europe. It was his backpacking thing throughout Europe. 2 days in, fractured his leg. He leaves for Europe on a Thursday. He's home by Monday. He was devastated. And then yet now we were facing, is he not going to be able to do 29/029 with me, which was 2.5 months later. And so by the time he got clearance, we were 5.5 weeks out. And I'm like, for you, this is going to be here. The mind is going to be everything for you, because your body,
you're right,
it's not going to have the endurance. It won't have gone through the training that my body has. Even though you're young, that's great. You'll be able to draw a little bit off of that, but that tank's gonna be emptied. And it was by middle of our second of eight ascents, he was starting to have that. I'm not sure I could do this. And I'm like, all right, this is let's just go to the next marker. The next marker. Can you make it to the next marker? We did that for 35.25 hours, getting him to the next marker until that moment came and we got to cross over together. I mean, I just bawled. I just held him and bawled, and my husband's bawling with him.
How did you do that, though? Arwen, how did you do that? Because a mother's instinct is obviously to protect their kid. Like, oh, you're hurting? Like that nurturing factor. But you knew something that he didn't.
I knew enough. I knew enough to help him to get to the next.
You knew all these things.
Right, I did. And I knew that I could get him to the next component. But I also knew where my limitation came. And when I recognized my limitation, I just believe God, the most perfect timing, because the mountain was so long, you usually didn't get to see the coaches because there's only 6 of them. And the head coach, who my son knew through the coaching calls that he was sitting on, happened to be at that aid station. And he looked at me and he said, how are things going? I'm like, things are good for me, but can you talk to him? And my son was literally falling asleep in a chair behind the table at the aid station. And we were on ascent number 5. It was the next morning. And we still had 3. We had 5, 6. We were on ascent 6. So we had 6, 7, and 8 to go. And he just looked at him and he just said, get up, Ashton, get up. And so Ashton's like, all of a sudden kind of like, and he's like, nope, we are not doing this. You have a 22-minute gondola ride. Your mom can make sure that you can sleep the whole time. You can get yourself down, but nope, this is what we're doing. We're getting ourselves up. We're getting back on that mountain. I know you don't feel well. And it just, at that moment, I knew that he needed a different voice. My voice had become a drone. He wasn't resisting me, but he just was tired and he needed somebody else. And he gives so much credit to Coach Brent at that moment, because Coach followed him up the next mile. And Ashton would want to sit down on a bench. And he's like, nope, we're not doing this. Take a couple of quick breaths and you keep moving. You just keep moving. And he just kept doing that until it was like it got him enough over the hump. He told him what he should be eating when he got to the top, get him some hot cocoa made from coffee. So it'd get him some caffeine in the system. And that was really what he needed at that time. So sometimes we also need to realize that we don't have the tools. And that's where somebody who knows more than we do, a coach, a therapist, a counselor, a pastor, somebody who is an expert.
A cowbell Rob,
a different voice can impart something different. And he really so much attributes his success in that last little bit to a different voice that wasn't mine.
Man, I'm blown away. I mean, I wish we had another hour because I would love to dissect this whole experience you guys had. You could write a book on that. I'm dead serious. Like it's amazing because so many parental kind of like warning signs are flashing in my head. Suffering, fatigue, all this stuff, like, oh, baby in the leg. There's so many things that you could have justified having him not do it, but you knew what not doing it would mean to him. That's huge. And Brent, what an amazing guy that is, because even he had to push some limits and be like, you've got this. I mean, that's, to me, that's where it all goes, and man, Arwen, what an amazing experience. And I just appreciate you sharing that. I have one final question for you. You can wrap up this podcast with this, because I had this thought at the very beginning, like, listening, like, again, I was like, dumb. I don't want to do this. It sounds horrible. But like, what do you tell the person that has that idea in their head that they just can't, like that's not for me? Because you had to have felt that at one point in time. Everyone has. But we can get up that mountain every time if we have a few things. But what do you tell that person that's listening to this right now that hasn't done the 5K, that hasn't even laced the shoes up, that hasn't even walked around the block, that like maybe has felt what I felt listening to you today? What do you tell that person about what's at the top?
Well, hiking may not be your thing. So that I would say find something that you at least can stomach. It's like, I love to hike. So that was, for me, that made sense. But even the 5K, like, if you've never even signed up for a 5K, just be willing to commit to it. Commit to doing something out of your comfort zone that is going to be hard, because when things are out of our comfort zone, that is where we grow. We don't grow in our comfort zone. We grow when we push out the limits. We have this area of failure that's just inevitable because you're learning something new. You're going through this experience, and failure isn't a horrible thing. It's just us learning how to broaden our comfort zone and enlarge our world. And, I could call failure because I was throwing up on the side of the mountain. I got really sick in Jackson Hole, but that was just part of my journey, and I had to be willing to overcome it. What would have been failure is if I would have let momentary discomfort. I knew I was not harming myself long-term, but that was one of the big questions I had with Ashton, because he was coming off a broken leg. So I had to defer to doctors and physical therapists. Are we going to do long-term damage if he attempts this? And the resounding agreement was no, he is not. It's just whether or not his body and mind will allow it. That's the question. That's up to him.
There you go.
Right? So be willing to put something on your calendar that scares you, because that is the only place where you truly feel alive, when you are facing something. Because usually what scares us is when crisis comes, and we get that same experience. And when I was on the eve of doing my first 29-0-29, I had never felt more alive. I was like looking at my watch. It's like, this is the last time I'm going to do this until that happens, because it was such a huge thing for me that I didn't know how difficult it was going to be. I didn't know if I had what it took. And so it was like, I had this heightened sense of all my senses, just this whole experience of life. And it's like, usually that happens when crisis hits, is we have this heightened awareness of appreciation of our life. And so when you put something that really does scare you, whether that's I have friends who do TEDx talks, or, I have friends who are launching a company, or I have, writing a book. My God, I know many of you have a book inside you and you want to write a book, and yet you haven't committed to that. Be willing to do something that scares you. And that is where, in that place, you truly feel your humanity. And so you just have to be willing to commit. That's one thing that I don't do to myself, is I don't commit to something even privately and quit on myself. Because if you quit on yourself, it's a lot easier to quit on other people.
I love it.
But if you can stay committed to yourself and just even small things you're willing to do, it's a lot easier to retain your commitments to other people over time.
Yeah. There's the title of the podcast, Just Commit, because that's what you did with your drinking. That's what you did on the mountain. That's what you did in life. So, Arwen, I tell you, I say this a lot, but this time I mean it. Like, we could go on another 2 or 3 hours and have some amazing conversations. So maybe we might have to have you back on one of these days, okay? So
happy to do it.
Just know, like you said, there's more to be told. Awesome. Well, listeners, you've been well fed. We will put Arwen's socials out there for you because, like she says, there's room for inspiring experiences when you start mingling with like-minded people. And I've seen a few of your stuff. I'm going to find that one with you and your son because that really resonated with me. But we'll put socials on there so you guys can come and follow her and see the endeavors and reach out. Say hi. She's maybe an introvert, but hey, she'll chat with you. So jump on there, do all you can to commit to what's coming next. And athletes, addictathlete.org, everything you need there. It'll help you turn your mess into a message.